Right, our next guest is Gary Mond. Gary, welcome to the programme.
Thank you for having me.
Gary, if you could pay attention in there and put the microphone up, because otherwise I will come out and give you a little retribution while I'm trying to bring peace to the world. Gary is head of the Jewish Assembly.
National
I beg your pardon. And that's your fault, so that's the producer's fault.
The national one, yeah.
The National Jewish Assembly. You had a meeting earlier. Let's go right to the top. You had a meeting earlier with Suella Braverman. What did she say?
That is correct. It was on Thursday. The people invited, there were 10 fairly senior people in the Jewish community who were invited. The purpose of the meeting was really for her to listen to our concerns rather than for her to actually give her own views. And, of course, there's tremendous concerns concerning the march today and the fact that the pro-Hamas contingent actually want to have this march every Saturday. There's tremendous fear and nervousness, I think is the right word to use, in the Jewish community in the UK at the moment. There's also a bit of confusion because they notice that on the one hand, and they don't know whether it's the government or the police, but they notice that these mass marches of 100,000 people are allowed to go untroubled, whereas when the Christian community want to have a march supporting Israel and supporting peace and love for the Jewish people, they have great difficulty to be able to get their march away because the police are less inclined to support it.
Why do you think so many people are, just excuse me 1 minute, just inside the control room, watch and listen, or there will be problems. I'm telling you now. This is a very serious situation we find ourselves in. And if I see a smile on anybody's face, I'll wipe it off, right? I'm telling you now. We are in the 21st century, Gary. We must surely be able to find a better way of sorting out our differences than just slaughtering innocent people. And I'm talking about it on both sides, because just obliterating one city and another city, it's just going to carry on, isn't it?
What is fundamental here is the refusal to accept the existence of Israel as a Jewish state.
Yeah.
That is the alpha and the omega of the entire situation.
But a lot of Palestinians would accept that if they didn't have Hamas sticking their guns in their backs.
That is a very debatable point, actually. I would say that a lot of the Palestinians who live in Gaza over the last 20 years, and we know that something like half of the population there is under the age of 18, a lot of the Palestinians living in Gaza have been brainwashed for much of their lives. When they were 4 and 5 years old, they were taken to terror camps and learn how to use an AK-47 rifle with a view to murdering Jews.
Well, we pay for the textbooks that describe us as...
Well, there's that too. You combine that with the terror camps.
Yeah.
But you don't want to see the slaughtering of a whole population, do you?
Of course not.
No.
That's not what's happening, though. That's not what's happening.
Absolutely not. Every civilian casualty is a tragedy, whether it's Jewish or Arab, it makes no difference.
So how do we find an end to this? How do we find a way of ridding this area of the ridiculously stupid terrorists who've got some bizarre view of their religion?
Well, they do want to commit a genocide, as we saw on October 7th.
But how do we do it without...
Right, in the longer run, I think it's...
both sides?
Now, here I'm giving my own personal opinion.
Yeah.
In the longer run, it's a question of education. It's a question of teaching children, particularly Arab children, that the Jews are not their enemies, Israelis are not their enemies, and peaceful coexistence should be the objective. So I think education is a major point. I question whether the idea of a two-state solution is optimal. Once again, I'm giving my own view, because if you have a two-state solution, who is going to actually be running the Palestinian state? If an organisation like Hamas is, or be it in Gaza or be it in Judea and Samaria.
So what would you do about that? I mean, presumably you understand the plight of Palestinian people because Jews were in the same plight before the end of the Second World War.
Absolutely.
So you must have sympathy for that. So what would you do?
They're not in the same plight as the Jews in the Second World War.
Ash, will you shut up a minute? I'm talking to Gary.
That's not true.
They're not. Ash is actually right. They're not in the same situation, but I still have sympathy nevertheless. My own personal view is that Gaza should go back to Egypt, which is where it was between 1948 and 1967. And when people say, oh, but the Egyptians would never take it back, that's where Americans come in with money.
Yeah.
That's the first thing.
That's a solution.
And I think some kind of accommodation with Jordan as far as Judea and Samaria are concerned.
The West Bank.
What some people call the West Bank. I prefer to give it its biblical name.
Why do you listen? Let me stop you there, Gary, because religion really makes my skin creep. Okay.
Yes.
And I respect you are religious, and he is. But why? I mean, there's no proof of religion, and yet people go to war. No proof of
one of them's got to be right.
No, they haven't.
Well, this applies all over the world.
I know. Why?
This is not just
in the 21st century, people are killing each other for some possible make-believe character that may not exist.
The solution to the problem is education and learning to live with each other, whatever our religions may be. The Jewish community in this country is very happy to live with other groups. We've seen major efforts by some of the main Jewish organisations to support interfaith work. It's debatable how successful they've been, but there's certainly no doubt about the efforts made.
I couldn't agree with you more. When I used to live in the East End and have very small children, the only nursery that would give them a place was a Jewish nursery. And I understand. Exactly. And I think people who want to live in a different way to the way Britain's culture and everything else is wrong. This is Britain.
It's a parallel culture.
We live in a certain way, and if you don't want to... It's like when we go, you might go to one of the Middle Eastern countries and you can't do certain things because of their culture. We should have the same thing happening over here. Now, what are your thoughts, Gary, when you see this march going around London and people shouting jihad, and they will say, but jihad can mean many different things?
I don't believe that they mean it in many different ways. I believe they're looking for a proxy method to talk about the slaughter of Jews, and Christians for that matter. Remember, they often say first the Saturday people, then the Sunday people.
But why are there so many young people who look like students who I don't think have any knowledge of how this all came about?
That's a fashion thing, isn't it?
Is it?
I think it goes to education, in all honesty. I am not an expert in this area, but I do think that children of all races or religions are not being properly taught to live with each other in a harmonious manner.
I want to show you a clip from earlier on in the week about a guy who I think should be locked up by now, and the key should have been thrown away. Have a look at this.
The only solution is jihad by the armies of the Muslim countries. Not by you, me, or we. What training do I have? There are people with arms in Egypt, in Pakistan, in Saudi Arabia, in Jordan, across the Muslim world, and right now they are...
I mean, you've probably seen that, everybody has, but it just made my skin creep. Why on earth is that man not locked up? Or is he? I don't know.
Well, that's a matter for the Home Secretary and possibly the police. But what I would say is this is where religion has taken a very ugly turn. We've seen intolerance demonstrated in what that man was saying. Religion should not be intolerant. We should be happy to live with each other, Jews, Christians, Hindus, Muslims. And when one actually takes a religion and subverts it, which is what has sadly happened to Islam to a considerable extent, then you have problems.
Do you think the police are letting the Jewish community down?
I think that there is the problem. The main problem we have here is I am not too sure who is really in charge.
Well, you met Suella Braverman, as you said at the beginning.
Yes,
did she not put your mind at rest?
She's told the police to do it, and the police have said they can't.
Who is in charge is something that I'm not qualified to answer, but I am not sure who is in charge. And above all, most people are not sure who's in charge.
The Home Secretary is in charge of the police. That's clear, isn't it? That's clear.
She should be.
Yeah.
Did she make you feel? Did she make you feel more confident or not?
She certainly made us feel very welcome. She certainly was very happy to listen to our views. As to confidence, time will tell. It's a question of actions and results.
Why did she say the police are useless, or didn't she? Maybe didn't she?
I don't recall.
Do you think the police are useless?
I do not recall her saying that.
They're a bit mealy-mouthed. So Mark Rowley going, "Oh, jihad could mean this," but they've got interpreters to try and look. Obviously, it doesn't mean that.
Let's do this as it is. We've got people going around the country shouting out various things: "Kill the Jews," jihad, from the river to the sea, and all of this.
A lot doing that.
Yeah, and don't understand what they're talking about, but they're talking about the total annihilation.
They're preaching hatred.
Yeah.
is the bottom line.
And the police are doing nothing.
I believe the police need to do more, certainly. I would like to see far more arrests, because I'm sure, although I didn't watch the march today, I'm sure there's far more than 2 people who should have been arrested with chance of jihad.
I think you're right.
After the event, they can arrest people, like they did in the London riots.
Yes.
They're all on camera. They can arrest them afterwards.
Well, you did a protest outside the BBC.
Correct.
And I'm glad that you did with our colleague Andre. Yeah. And we could show a little bit of it now. And are you planning?
We haven't got
you haven't got a clip of it. Okay. Are you planning another one?
I'm talking
you could take Ash along with you.
I'm talking to my executive about that. There's two possibilities. One is yes. The other is we're going to wait for the Christian community to get their one organised and support theirs.
Do you think the Jewish community and the Christian community have more to fear from our police when they're demonstrating?
I don't know. What I can say is that we are disappointed that the Christian community were unable to get their own march away last week, which is what they wanted to do.
You see, I think
that
we
would
should
have been 20 to 25,000 people going through Golders Green and Hendon, preaching peace and love and support for Jewish people.
I think somebody actually needs to tell the Chief Constable in London, although this is happening all over the country where there are marches the whole time, some for Palestine, some for the Jewish community.
But they're very peaceful, Israeli ones. There's no call for...
But the fact is that the police seem to be totally inept at doing their job as far as people shouting hatred are concerned. They'll probably come and arrest me for having a...
They need to grow a pair.
You are right. There's no question you're right. But where does the buck actually stop? Does it stop with the Home Secretary? Does it stop with the head of the police? Does it stop with anyone else? You see, I run a business, and in my business, the buck stops with me. I'm the owner.
Exactly.
And everyone does what I tell them. But with regard to the government situation and politics and the police, the situation appears to the uninitiated to be so much more confusing, which is unfortunate.
Why are we allowing people of a different culture to get away more, if you like, with things? Because they've come from... Well, political correctness goes stuff itself.
They're scared of being called racist. It happened with the Manchester bomber. It's happened with the rape gangs up north. It's still going on today.
But listen, what about the guy... We'll just show this as well again. The guy went round tearing down the pictures of those that have been... kidnapped. And this is happening not only in this country, but it's happening all over the world.
We need to understand what's behind it. It's Jew hatred, pure and simple. Nothing else.
It's the same as the Nazis.
It is an attitude of mind that will not accept Jews. That's what it is.
You know, this is a young woman we're seeing doing this now on here, and a young guy. I mean, are they just thick? I mean, what is the problem?
They're supporting the kidnap of babies and children and rape of women. That's what they're supporting.
Whether they're thick or whether they are actively supporting the kidnapping of babies and children may be debatable, but there's no question it is completely wrong, and anti-Semitism sits behind it.
Why has anti-Semitism been a problem for so long? I mean, it doesn't seem that we teach anything about the Second or First World Wars in school anymore.
I know that's disgraceful that we don't.
We're all wearing poppies, and I think people don't, a lot of younger people don't understand why.
Yeah.
They don't understand why the cenotaph in London is a sacred monument for all the people who lost their lives, and thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people did. And yet we're carrying on the way they are now, sort of 80 years in the future, and it's as if we've learnt nothing.
I think one has to understand with anti-Semitism, it really splits into three different types. There's the old-style far-right neo-Nazi anti-Semitism, which is actually, I believe, reducing. Then there's been left-wing anti-Semitism with regard to the Labour Party under Jeremy Corbyn, which has also been quite prominent.
Rearing its ugly head again.
But there is also fundamentalist Islamic anti-Semitism, which has grown over the years, and a lot of people in authority are nervous about it and perhaps not taking the action against it that they ought to.
And what about Keir Starmer? He's caught between a rock and a hard place. What's going to go on with him? You know, he calls for us. He says there can't be a ceasefire. Then he gets a load of trouble from his 5 million.
He will do whatever he thinks is going to hold the Labour Party together. My personal view, and different people think differently on this, is that the majority of the Labour Party do not support his view. And what I keep telling people is don't so much look at the members of Parliament. There are only 200 Labour MPs at the moment. If opinion polls are right, after the next election, there could be 450 Labour MPs. So there's 250 prospective parliamentary candidates in winnable seats for Labour whose views we don't know and could well be very antithetical to Keir Starmer.
Do you fear a Labour Party government?
I'm speaking for myself here, and personally, I am concerned.
And do the majority of the Jewish community of this country fear it?
I think that the recent events mean a greater proportion fear it than would have been the case.
People are going to leave now, aren't they?
So what is happening, which is worrying me, is that our two main parties are becoming polarised on the side of a particular religious ideology, and that worries me greatly.
I don't think the Conservative Party would say that they're polarised. They tend to be far more pro-Israel. But there are also a lot of support for the Muslim community in the Conservative Party. I think the Conservative Party generally is responsible in this regard. The Labour Party, however, we're starting to see, we saw this under Corbyn, and we're now starting to see again a degree of intolerance. The Labour Party, or at least a number of senior figures in it, are calling for a ceasefire. What does a ceasefire mean? It means leaving Hamas in place so they can do the same thing again in a year or 2 years' time, if not much worse, because what they're angling for is the recent 5,500 terrorists in Israeli jails.
And let's remember the 7/7 bombers, the Borough Market killings, all the terrorist attacks come from the same place. So if you're supporting that, then you're supporting the terrorist attacks here.
But are you actually calling, Gary, and I'm sure you're not, for the complete, everybody who might have said something supportive of Hamas should be just killed and got rid of?
I'm calling for firstly for parliamentarians who make laws to be quite clear on what will constitute hate speech. There is some confusion about that. And it needs to be a definition. I mean, we have the IHRA definition, which I tend to think is probably the best we've got at the moment. And we need to make sure the right legislation is passed, and we need to ensure that it is taught properly in schools and workplaces, and build from there.
Gary,
we need clarity.
And the law enforcement.
What do you... we're coming up to the end of our time, but what do you actually think is going to be the future of this? Because is there going to be an all-out war that's going to be dragged on until every last person standing has been annihilated? There has surely to be some kind of coming together. Do you think America are the country to do it?
I hope so. But I think in the short term, Hamas has to be eradicated. Hamas is essentially a neo-Nazi group dedicated to killing every Jew everywhere in the world, especially in Israel.
It's the same as ISIS.
But you can't guarantee on eradicating everybody who's... Because a lot of them have gone to other countries and hidden out.
You can't eradicate an idea, but you can eradicate a regime, and the corollary to that is Nazi Germany. Stalin, Roosevelt and Churchill decided in 1945 that Nazi Germany had to be eradicated. Unconditional surrender.
Gary, I've got to go now,
but they couldn't
because
stop.
they'll take us off air.
Exactly.
But thank you very much indeed for explaining it so well.